When a ruthless HOA president built a pipeline through my land without permission, she thought I'd roll over and take it. Instead, I bought the water rights and shut off their entire supply, one valve twist at a time. I had just finished building my dream cabin on 20 acres of inherited land tucked away in the foothills, a quiet stretch of forested peace, untouched for decades and stubbornly resilient. The kind of place where the wind whistles between the pines and deer stroll through the tall grass like they own it. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. After years of working construction jobs and living in noisy apartment buildings with paper-thin walls, this was my sanctuary. That is, until Karen showed up. She wasn't a neighbor, not technically. She lived 2 miles east in a pristine, Stepford-style gated community called Oak Hollow. Big white houses with wraparound porches, matching mailboxes, and precisely trimmed hedges lined the streets like it was some Norman Rockwell painting brought to life. It didn't take long for me to find out Karen was the president of their HOA, the kind of woman who believes the whole world needs to function according to her personal spreadsheet. I met her for the first time the same day. I woke up to a backhoe digging through my land like it belonged there. It was about 7 a.m. when I heard the low, guttural roar of diesel engines rumbling through my morning coffee. I stepped onto my porch in nothing but boxers and boots, and there it was, a crew of construction workers trenching in neat line right across my pasture. Dust flying, sod torn up, orange flags flapping in the wind. I ran down the hill and demanded to know what the hell was going on. One guy in a reflective vest handed me a folded piece of paper like it was a flyer for a bake sale. It was a permit, a legal document stating Oak Hollow HOA pipeline extension, Blue Creek Supply. My name wasn't on it. No signature from me. No prior notice. Nothing. Who authorized this? I barked. Talk to the HOA, he said, shrugging, already turning away. We're just following orders. That's how I found myself standing at the Oak Hollow HOA office a few hours later, facing off with Karen in her full suburban battle gear. A puffy North Face vest, oversized sunglasses pushed up like a headband, and a Starbucks cup that probably had more sugar than coffee. She greeted me with a tight-lipped smile and a tone so condescending it could sterilize a cactus. "Oh, you must be the landowner over the ridge," she chirped like she was talking to a lost puppy. "We've been meaning to send you a letter. Isn't this exciting?" "Exciting?" I asked, barely containing myself. "You're running a pipeline through my land. You didn't ask. You didn't inform me. You just showed up with bulldozers. It's for the community," she said with a theatrical shrug. "You should be proud to contribute to progress. It's only a small portion of your land." Proud. She said like she was offering me a medal instead of ripping up a chunk of my family's legacy. I told her I never gave permission and that I'd be talking to the county. "Oh, but we already got it cleared with them," she said, pulling out a laminated copy of the permit like it was her trump card. "There's an old public easement from the 60s, probably before your time. Back home, I tore through my deed and property records like a man possessed. I found no mention of any easement. I went down to the county clerk's office and scoured maps and microfilm. And sure enough, there it was, a vague, poorly documented line granting non-commercial utility access to some neighboring parcels for agricultural irrigation. But over the years, it had never been used, never enforced, and sure as hell never intended for a modern HOA pumping water to a gated suburb. The county said their hands are tied. The permit had been reviewed. The HOA had lawyers. If I want to challenge it, I need to go to court. And that, they kindly reminded me, was expensive. Meanwhile, the crews kept digging. They brought in big cement tubes, bulldozed a road for maintenance, and left huge tire ruts in the soil. Trees were cut down without a second thought. One morning, I found a family of displaced foxes nesting in my shed. My land was changing before my eyes, and not by choice. Karen came by a few times to inspect progress. She never asked permission. Just parked her SUV like she owned the place, sometimes with a friend in tow, and strolled around in yoga pants pointing at things. One time, I came back from town to find her sunbathing on a lawn chair next to the trench, sipping LaCroix. Another day, I found a sign that read, "Future Oak Hollow Green Space, Private Use Only." They installed a valve station, an ugly concrete box with metal piping, right on my lower slope, barely hidden by a few shrubs they planted afterward. Karen said it blended with a natural aesthetic. I said it looked like a toilet for giants. And the HOA newsletters kept coming. Somehow they got my address, probably from county records, and started mailing me updates about their wonderful new pipeline. One issue had a full spread about the engineering marvel they'd secured access to, with an article titled "Neighbors Helping Neighbors, a Victory for Community Infrastructure." They even thanked me by name for my cooperation. I want to torch the whole damn stack. I started keeping to myself more after that. I'd sit on my porch in the evenings, staring at that concrete box, letting the anger simmer like a pot of beans on low heat. But then one sentence in a newsletter caught my eye. It was a brag, Karen style, about how this pipeline would secure Oak Hollow's exclusive access to the Blue Creek Basin for decades to come. Blue Creek. That name struck a chord. My grandfather used to talk about it, back when he taught me how to fish. He said the springs near our land fed into a deeper basin that provided water all across the valley, long before the cities built modern reservoirs. I got curious. I took a day off and went back to the county records office. I dove into the old hydrology maps in the Department of Water Resources archives. What I discovered made my jaw drop. The water rights to Blue Creek had been subdivided generations ago. Most were claimed by old farms, but a surprising number had lapsed, left unclaimed, forgotten, or expired. A few were even still open for application. One particular tract sat right beneath my property, feeding directly into the pipeline the HOA had just built. I spent the next few weeks learning everything I could about acquiring water rights. I called state officials. I researched well law. I visited dusty local law offices until I found one old-timer willing to help me for a fraction of the usual cost. It was complicated. It was bureaucratic, but it was possible. And if I play my cards right, I wouldn't just be the angry landowner shouting at clouds. I'd be the guy who owned the water flowing beneath Karen's shiny new pipeline. That night, I sat back in my porch chair with a bottle of whiskey and watched the moon cast shadows over the trench. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't mad. I was calculating. If Karen wanted a war, she'd pick the wrong hill to dig on, because I was about to flip the board. The next morning, I got up before sunrise, packed a thermos of coffee, and drove into town with a mission. I was going to take back what was mine, maybe not with brute force, but with brains and paperwork. The thing about Karen and people like her is they always underestimate the quiet guy. They expect pushback in the form of shouting, maybe a few angry Facebook posts. What they don't expect is someone who learns the rules better than they do and uses them like a scalpel. I started with the local water board office, a quiet little building tucked between the DMV and an abandoned laundromat. The clerk inside, Barbara, name tag, slightly crooked, was one of those old-school bureaucrats who knew everything and nothing all at once. At first, she gave me the standard line, "Water rights are complex, sir." But when I told her I was sitting directly over a Blue Creek feeder line, she perked up. She opened a drawer, flipped through files, and pulled out a manila folder marked Blue Creek, subdivided parcels. There it was, gold in ink form. Turns out, in the 1940s, a local water district had mapped the entire underground basin and divvied it up among landowners, mostly ranchers and farmers. Over the years, many of those parcels changed hands. Some owners renewed their rights, others didn't. A few water rights had expired and reverted back to the state. What shocked me most was that 3 parcels connected to my land were currently marked unclaimed, available for application. I felt like I was staring at buried treasure. Now, buying water rights isn't like buying land. There's paperwork, environmental checks, application fees, approval wait times, and sometimes even local board votes. It's slow, bureaucratic, and intentionally frustrating. But I didn't mind. I had time, and more importantly, I had motivation. Every time I thought of Karen lounging on her stupid deck chair next to my trench, it gave me enough fuel to keep pushing. The state's process was first come, first served. If I filed today, I could lock in priority. So I sat down at a dusty side desk and started filling out the applications by hand. 3 parcels, 3 rights, enough water to supply Oak Hollow, and then some. Over the next few weeks, I buried myself in paperwork and research. I learned what a priority date meant, how to legally install a monitoring well, and what kind of flow rate calculations I needed to justify usage. I paid a hydrogeologist $600 to assess the land and draft a report. I filed it all with the county and the state. I created a small LLC to make things more official. And I requested that all water flow permissions for my land be reevaluated due to new ownership and intended use. The best part? I did it all without making a sound. Karen and the HOA had no idea what was coming. They were too busy celebrating their shiny new pipeline. Every time I passed their neighborhood, I'd see signs bragging about 100% independent water security and future-proof living starts in Oak Hollow. I even heard they were pitching their success story to other HOAs in the region. They were too confident, too busy patting themselves on the back to realize they'd built their pipeline straight through a hydrological trap. Meanwhile, I had my approvals in motion. Parcel 17A was approved first. The state mailed me a certificate with my name on it and a flow rate allowance just big enough to matter. A few weeks later, Parcel 18B came through. Then 19C. That third one was the crown jewel. It was the direct source line the HOA tapped into, and now it was under my control. I hired a local company to install a proper monitoring valve near the spring entrance. I kept it low profile. No big machinery, no signage. Just a small wellhead and a legal marker confirming the water rights holder. I also installed a data logger to track water flow. This wasn't just about revenge. It had to be airtight if I wanted to hold up against lawyers. Because I knew once Karen found out, she was going to bring every legal pitchfork she could find. It took nearly 3 months from the day I first spotted that backhoe on my land to the day all 3 water rights were officially registered in my name. By then, the spring rains had come and gone, and Oak Hollow was ramping up for their summer showcase, a ridiculous event where they invited nearby towns to tour their perfect suburban oasis. I waited until the week before their event. I drafted a formal letter to the HOA. I cited the water rights ownership, the parcels involved, and the unauthorized tapping of a resource I now legally controlled. I was polite, even friendly, just stating the facts. At the end of the letter, I informed them that I would be exercising my right to restrict flow until a formal agreement could be negotiated, including compensation for land use, maintenance access, and, of course, water extraction fees. Karen didn't respond with a letter. She showed up in person. She came barreling up my driveway in her spotless white SUV, window down, hair done like she was headed to court even though it was 93 degrees out. She didn't even say hello. "What the hell is this?" she shouted, waving my letter like it was a parking ticket. "Good morning to you too," I said, leaning against the porch post with my coffee. "You can't do this. The pipeline is already in place. The water's flowing. The system is operational." "Doesn't matter," I said calmly. "The rights weren't yours. They're mine now. That pipeline runs through my land, pulls from my source, and you never got permission. You want water? You're going to have to talk terms." She laughed, but it wasn't the confident Karen laugh. It was the kind of laugh people do when they're realizing they just stepped in something they can't scrape off. "This is extortion," she hissed. "You're blackmailing an entire community." "No," I said, "I'm enforcing the law. The same law you used to push that permit through. Remember that easement from the 60s? Guess what? It doesn't grant water rights. Just surface access." I read the fine print. She left without saying goodbye, just spun her wheels in the dirt and drove off. 2 days later, I turned the valve. It wasn't dramatic, no geysers or sparks, just a slow, steady reduction. By the next morning, Oak Hollow residents were calling their HOA, wondering why their water pressure had dropped to a trickle. By day 2, the community pool had to close. By day 3, I heard Karen was holding emergency meetings with their board, and I was just getting started. I'd written up a proposed agreement with terms that weren't insane. Pay me a fair monthly rate, restore my land to its prior condition, plant 50 new trees, and issue a formal apology in their community newsletter. Oh, and Karen had to step down from the HOA presidency. It was time to settle the score. I didn't expect them to cave right away. HOA boards are notorious for being stubborn, especially when Karen's pride was on the line. But they weren't dealing with a nosy neighbor complaining about lawn height. They were dealing with a man who legally owned the one thing they needed to survive: water. After I shut off the valve, I didn't hear from them for a week. No formal response to my proposal. No counters. Just radio silence. I figured they were trying to lawyer their way out of it, digging through the contracts, hoping to find a loophole. The thing was, I'd already done the digging. They laid their pipeline, assuming no one would notice or care. They bet on apathy, and they lost. On the 8th day, I got a letter, certified mail, heavy legal language. It was a cease and desist, accusing me of malicious interference with critical infrastructure. I smiled reading it. A scare tactic. But they made a crucial mistake. They didn't actually dispute my ownership of the water rights. They were just mad that I exercised them. I handed the letter to my lawyer, an old ranch buddy of mine named Troy, who now ran a small law office out of the next town over. He chuckled and said, "They're bluffing. They've got no case. They never even secured a utility easement for groundwater use. You got them by the throat." So we went on the offensive. Troy filed a formal notice of trespass and unlawful extraction on my behalf. He added a damages clause for the trench they cut through my back pasture. Meanwhile, I put up signs around the wellhead and installed a motion-activated camera. If they were tempted to open that valve themselves, I wanted it all on tape. The community, of course, had no idea what was really happening. All they knew was their dream neighborhood was running dry. Faucets dribbled, gardens withered, toilets wouldn't refill. The HOA started rationing, odd days for lawns, even days for dishes. Bottled water deliveries started showing up at the clubhouse. It was chaos in cul-de-sac paradise. Then came the press. It started local. Oak Hollow faces unexplained water shortage. Then regional. Reporters started asking questions. Why was a brand new community pipeline suddenly dry? How did no one notice that it crossed private land? And who exactly was this rancher holding the spigot? Karen did her best to spin it. She called me uncooperative, vindictive, and irrational. Said I was endangering families and ruining property values. I didn't say much publicly. I didn't need to. The paper trail did the talking for me. Every title, every signature, every permit, they were all mine. Then the HOA tried to rally the residents. They hosted an emergency town hall under a big white tent, sweating in the July heat while Karen shouted into a megaphone about standing strong and not letting bullies win. But the cracks were showing. People started asking real questions. Why didn't we check the water rights? Why didn't we negotiate before digging? Why didn't anyone vet the leadership? One brave old man stood up and asked the million-dollar question. Why is our entire water supply dependent on land we don't own? Dead silence. That was the moment it all unraveled. A week later, I got a call from a new interim HOA president. Turns out Karen had been voted out in a private meeting, effective immediately. They wanted to talk. I told them I'd meet at my property by the wellhead. I wanted them to see exactly where the power now rested. 3 board members showed up. No suits, just jeans and sun hats. I respected that. They apologized. Sincerely. Said they'd been blindsided by Karen's fast-track leadership and her obsession with branding Oak Hollow as a model community. They wanted to make things right. I handed them the same agreement I'd written weeks ago. There were some minor edits, one less tree, a slightly lower monthly fee, but the spirit was intact. Payment for water usage, land restoration, formal acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and a promise: never again would they make decisions that affected people without involving them. They signed. I reopened the valve that afternoon. Water flowed again, cool and clean, into their system. Within 24 hours, pressure normalized, the pool refilled, and life in Oak Hollow returned to normal. Well, almost. Karen didn't take it well. I heard she tried to sue the HOA for wrongful dismissal. That went nowhere. She moved out within a month. Rumor is she sold her house at a loss. Some say she left the state entirely. Others say she's trying to start another HOA in some coastal development. I don't care. She's someone else's problem now. As for me, I used the first few checks from the water agreement to fix the trench, replant grass, and install a proper gate on the path the construction crew had trampled. I even put up a sign: private property, access by permission only. Subtle, legal, clear. But more than the money or the restoration, I got something better: peace of mind. I proved that you don't have to yell to win. You don't have to stoop to their level. You just have to know what's yours, learn the rules, and play the long game. Let them mock you. Let them build pipelines through your land. Let them brag on social media. Because when the time comes and the water stops flowing, they'll remember the quiet guy with the clipboard. Funny thing is, Oak Hollow and I actually get along now. The new board invited me to a fall harvest festival last year, offered me a little booth to sell my farm's produce. Kids came by and asked questions about the water system. One of them even called me the water sheriff. I didn't hate it. And sometimes on hot days, I drive out past the ridge and look down at those long black pipelines cutting across the fields like a vein. And I think about how close they came to taking everything without asking. I think about how easy it would have been to give up. But mostly I think about the water, how it still flows under my land by my hand. And that, more than anything, makes me smile.